Alright, this is Crayfish Taxidermy Part 2. So, it's been sitting for a couple weeks now. The nails are, some of them, very easy to pull out. In the last video on this project, a lot of these I just pushed in with my fingers, so they come out quite easily. Now, this one here does not want to come out, so might have a challenge with that. I gotta get these out here. As I expected, it turned bright red. And you gotta be very careful here because this thing is very, very fragile at this point. And I'm gonna do a little bit to rectify that. However, it's always going to remain quite easily damaged. It's going to be very easy to damage for the rest of its existence, really. Although a couple of things I'm going to do should help with that a little bit. I gotta get this nail out, but I can't get a hammer in here. There we go. Out comes some salt. Is to be expected. Alright, well there. And all the dark spots, the dark in these grooves and along on the head and stuff, that's just little bits of dried algae. I personally don't really care about it being there. Some people probably do. The white stuff there, that there is a little bit of super glue I put in to stabilize it before it dried, and all the rest is salt. The salt will come off with water and a toothbrush. So let's get to that. Alright, now just get your toothbrush nice and wet and start rubbing it off. Should come off fairly easily. And you might need to do this multiple times because when the salt gets wet, you can't really see it anymore until it dries again. So I'll scrape off what I can see is coming off here, and then I'll let it dry for a little while and come back and probably scrape off some more. You see that super glue there isn't coming off. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. Probably do something though. Really only the tail is what needs to be cleaned like this, because the rest of it, the underside, is all, it's on the bottom, you know, so nobody's really going to see that and notice the salt on it. See if it makes any difference on that algae stuff there. I doubt it will, but you never know. It's already looking better. Alright, now I'm going to make this one shiny. So for that purpose, I brought this stuff here, lacquer. Just bought this at Home Depot. I've used it on a couple walking sticks and other taxidermied crayfish in the past. Gives it a nice glossy look when it's finished. Now I did say before, in the last one, I was talking about how crayfish that occasionally get out of the aquarium and all that, they will bleach too and they will look quite similar. Well, here is one that escaped from the aquarium and got attacked by the dog. That's what those big holes are. and then I just gave it to the dog, and apparently he didn't eat it, so it dried out, and the color is very similar. So there's that. Just figured I'd show. This one, I'm not sure what's going on. This is a crayfish that the dog killed as well. A very large crayfish, actually. I mean, look at the claw size there. It's huge. I have one bigger inside. But it's turning red at the tips here. But this is still blue. And judging by the weight, I would say it hasn't fully dried, and that's why it still has that color. Although, I might get lucky and it might stay blue. So, we'll see. Anyway, back to this one. It's dried off now. And look at that. Almost all the white is gone now. So that helped a lot. I'm going to scrub a little bit on the claws, a little more on the tail, try and get a little bit more of that gunk off, algae gunk off, and then proceed to the next step. Alright, so scrubbed it a little bit more. I don't know if you can really notice. However, I did manage to get those bits of super glue off. So they came off easy enough with the fingernail, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now, next step, this is just something you don't have to do, but something I'm going to do, and that is take it off. Take it off of those 2 remaining nails that are inside of it, if you remember. Oh, there's some more salt coming out. And you gotta be very, very careful here, because limbs can easily break off during this. Come on. Doesn't want to come off. Alright, so I got it off. That took quite a while. It was really wedged in there. Unfortunately, one of his paleopods did come off. It's the male apparatus for delivering sperm to female. In crayfish, they have 2 pairs. And next thing I'm going to do is kind of take dry toothbrush this time. Although it probably doesn't make much of a difference. And just scrape some of the salt off. Now, swimmerets, nobody's really going to be looking at them, so in my opinion, swimmerets can come off. It's not a big deal. Now, depending on how you have the crayfish posed, you might not want that. But I'm having it tail is fully down, laid out flat. Nobody can really see underneath it, so I think we're good. The main thing you want to do is make sure that there's no salt that might be visible from above or from the side. That's the main goal here, to minimize view of salt. Now, of course, if anybody's looking really closely, they're probably going to find some, because this is like, I'm by no means a professional, but I've done it a couple times, so I think I know it fairly well. Oh, there goes the last swimmerette. So there, that's pretty good, I think. A little more salt coming off. Okay. I'm just getting a little bit that the toothbrush wasn't getting with my fingernail. Although again, be very, very careful with this, because it is incredibly fragile right now. And will remain so for the rest of its existence. Okay, there. I think that's good. Set that out of the way. This is probably going to be a lot more visible than the salt on the underside of that crayfish. So I'm going to get off as much of this as I can with the toothbrush. For this, you probably do need to wet it down. Luckily, it's like 105 degrees outside right now, so it doesn't take long to dry. I left that crayfish sitting for way longer than I needed to, but once it's dry, it's not really going to degrade. I mean, of course, nothing is permanent, but it'll last a long time if you take good care of it. Keep it in a dry area, especially without really bright sunlight, because out here the sunlight is very direct and bright. Obviously not as bad as the equator, but there it's also humid, and the humidity is more of a concern. So maybe that's all right. I'm gonna let it dry. Although while it's drying, I can do the next step. Put salt out of here. Okay. And while that wood is drying, I'm going to work on the next step, which is super glue. You don't need any on the tail. Honestly, what I am most concerned about is these big claws, because when I pick them up, I can feel them move. Okay? And I don't like that. They're not supposed to move. So I'm just going to take right in there in that joint where the claw meets the body, underneath, as discreet as possible, of course. And I'm trying not to block where the nail goes in, because that will prevent the nail from coming out in future once I stick it back on. So it's just right there, around in the joints. It's probably a good idea to do all of the legs like this. However, it's not necessary. I think I'm going to do them though. Alright, now once that's done, you just gotta wait for it to completely set for the next step. There we go, all the super glue is applied. I put a lot around the joints of the claws where they connect to the body, because that is probably the weakest point on this crayfish. So that is most important for me to secure. The next step is going to be lacquer. This thing's just about dry, so that's good. Now, I'm going to lacquer the crayfish before I put it on the wood, because I want the wood to retain its rough, natural texture. I don't want it to be shiny. So that's not going to be lacquered, but the crayfish is. Yeah, it just gives it a nice shiny look, and it also seals it a bit more. So it'll probably, I mean, I don't know, I've never tested this, but it will probably last a while longer if you do lacquer it than if you don't. So that's what I'm gonna do. You do need to wait for the glue to dry before you lacquer it though. Glue needs to be completely set. And so I'm gonna go wander off for like 20 minutes, but for you it'll be a second. All right, it's time for lacquer. So make sure you do this in an open area, preferably outside. And it's best if it isn't windy, which to my amazement is not windy right now where I am. Usually is. So shake up the lacquer and spray it on. Now the thing is, if you're indecisive about whether or not to put on the lacquer, don't put it on. Because once it's on permanently. There's no getting it off. But you can always put it on. So that's the first side done. I did the underside first, personally. It doesn't matter. But see, now it's got some shine to it there, some glossiness. So I gotta let that fully set, which shouldn't be more than 10 minutes, and then I can do the other side. Alright, well, now the first side is dry, at least dry enough, and this is the side where you're really going to see the difference. Believe me, it will be big. So, I don't particularly mind getting lacquer on my hands, but I doubt it's healthy. So, it's probably better if you don't. Hold on. Gotta get situated. Obviously, I'm going to do the back half of it first. Alright, now I gotta switch it around. My hands are covered in lacquer now. It's not a big deal. It's not like it's gonna kill you. There we go. Now we wait. Alright, it's been a while. Remember I showed this earlier? Real big claw? Well, here's a crayfish of that size, approximately. Yeah, they're huge. Caught them at a little pond in Phoenix. Here is my previous biggest one that I taxidermied before, and then look at this guy. He's that same size. And I got one even bigger than him inside in the aquarium. I'll probably show him at some point in some other video. Alright, final step. He's all done, dry, glossy, looks amazing. At least I think he does. Now, another tricky step, getting him back on the nails. This is probably going to be just as difficult as getting him off. One of the nails just doesn't want to fit. Come on. Almost got it. Sorry, I'm taking it out of frame. Almost there. There we go. Perfect. Oh, look at that. He looks good. So I'm going to take him off and get some good shot. Now, is that cool or what? Well, there we go. Crayfish taxidermy part 2. I think it turned out pretty good. Might make another one in the future, or make it all in one long video using 2 crayfish. But yeah, I think that turned out pretty good. So Hope you found this useful. Bye-bye. Have a good day.